Good morning, CLC. Right now, in this moment, at this time, I invite each and every one of you to love yourself just the way you are. If you feel so inclined, go ahead and take a nice, deep, cleansing breath in, breathing in the cool, calming oxygen that is for you for this day. And as you release the breath, release all that no longer serves you. Go ahead and take another nice, deep, cleansing breath in. And as you release this breath, just allow your body to relax in this moment. If you feel so inclined, go ahead and shake out any stress or tension. Let your jaw just relax. You might need to wiggle your fingers or your toes. Ground yourself and allow your mind to be here, now. Universal love enfolds me. Universal wisdom inspires me. Universal spirit enlightens me. Universal power encircles me. I am one, and all is well. As we begin this inner healing process, let me invite you to relax in quiet confidence, opening yourself up to the miracle-working higher power. Now symbolize the unity of your thinking and feeling nature by touching your chest with your hand, and let my words act as your own for your own inner healing, acceptance, and receptivity. I acknowledge that there is a power, intelligence, and wisdom greater than my own. I am in the midst of it, and it is in the midst of me, sensitive and responsive to my every thought, word, action, and feeling. I now make this true for myself by saying aloud, I acknowledge. Acknowledging this higher power working through my life, I admit that I am personally responsible for solving my own problems while being guided and assisted by something greater than myself. As I am ready to surrender the conflicts of my ego to the wisdom of this infinite presence, I simply speak these words. I surrender. Knowing that forgiveness is the key to unconditional love, I now unconditionally forgive anyone and everyone who has ever injured me in any way, real or imagined. And I now forgive myself for all of my mistaken judgments and their resulting actions. From my deepest level of understanding, I now say, I forgive. Realizing that I continually experience the effects of my own thinking, I now choose to allow this higher power to recreate me deeply, filling my mind with thoughts that are only positive, constructive, loving, and beautiful. I call upon this divine inflow by stating aloud, I choose I now center upon that one very special idea that I'm willing to accept as real for me in this coming week. Visualizing that idea as already acted upon and brought to pass. In seeing my idea become a fact of my experience, I enjoy the happiness and peace of my thought fulfilled and gratefully speak these words. I accept. Knowing that I have an everlasting place in the midst of the power that sustains all creation, as well as the support of all those around me. I allow myself to relax in the peace of fulfillment and gratitude and say, I release. Now, in my mind's eye, I envision the presence of someone near and dear to me. This can be a friend, a family member, a teacher or mentor, someone who has touched my life in deep and loving ways. Someone who may not be physically present in this room or even on this planet anymore. I turn to that image in my mind's eye and say, I'm grateful for the good in your life. Now I open my eyes, turn to the world around me, and joyfully speak to anyone physically present in this room or virtually on this broadcast, and share in confidence and gratitude in saying, I'm grateful for the good in your lives.
And a huge thank you to Reverend Arthur Johnson for last week. Brought down the house. It took all week to put it back up for today. If you're watching, little brother, thank you again so much for bringing the word the way that you do. What I have for you today, as they say in restaurants, you know, what we have for you today. Throughout this month is a series drawn from several different sources, principally Rufus Jones of the Religious Society of Friends, more about them in a moment, and also some Gnostic material. That's spelled Gnostic, and you can look it up, but you know what? You don't have to, because if you just look at the Facebook feed of this service, you'll see there are already links up about Gnosticism and what it means and where it comes from. But what? Not yet, but there will be. Well, by the time they see it, there will be. So what we're looking at, and your song, I don't know if you knew this because it's not in the title of my talk that was published, but the silence is a big factor in the talk today. The idea of the silence within. Now, we're not going to have silence. I'm going to stand here talking for the next 20 or 30 minutes. So it's a metaphor, right? The silence thing. Well, there's a metaphysical group on the planet that you might not be all that familiar with, if you're familiar with metaphysical groups generally, anyway, called the Religious Society of Friends, better known to most of us as the Quakers. Okay? Friendswood, Texas, you've heard of, south of Houston, was founded by Quakers, hence the name. And the Quakers have been a force for good on this planet since the 17th century. They are an amazing group of people, and they have as part of their teaching, which is a very simple and beautiful faith that they practice, they have as the centerpiece of it the idea of something called the inner light. Capital I, capital L, the inner light. The inner light is the divine nature in you. It's very similar to Vedanta. It's very similar to the ubiquity of the divine that you find in some of the Hindu and Buddhist teachings, but drawn through a Christian Protestant lens focus due to the time that they arose and where they arose, which was in England. George Fox was their founder. And one of their key teachers in the late 19th and into the first half of the 20th century was Rufus Jones, who was a Quaker mystic. And when he writes, as he does, I have a collection of his, what they call essential writings, which is a hugely subjective call, what makes the cut and what doesn't. But in there, I'm leafing through this, and I'm finding all this material that could have been written by Ernest Holmes, or it could have been written by Emily Cady, or the Fillmores, or any of the New Thought people that we're familiar with in this house. Because it's saying you go into the stillness, you go into the silence, and you listen. And you screen out the noise as best you can, and presently you hear the voice of God. Presently you hear the voice of the divine nature telling you that you are of it. It's not separate from you. Later we'll speak of duality and non-duality later in this month. I'll have some more material for you on that. But the key takeaway of this oneness idea is the divine nature is your nature. It's your nature. It doesn't always feel like it is, and we can get away from it, or we can ignore it. We can be oblivious to it until we're reminded of it, but it's still our nature. And so you sit and you listen. And in Quaker meetings very often what they'll do, they'll sing a few songs, they'll say a few prayers, and then they'll fall silent. And they'll listen for that voice of that inner light. And gradually one or another in the congregation may stand and speak and say, here's what I found in the inner light. And they know to do it the right way. They don't just get up and say random things, you know. They know to really dig deep. What is it that's really coming to me? It's sort of a free association. You know what it reminds me of? The visioning process. Doesn't it? You listen for something deep and transformative, and then you share it with the group. And maybe it doesn't mean a whole lot to anybody else, but they bear witness. They testify to the connection that you've expressed, and they realize that anyone can have this connection, and so it drives everybody deeper. Now, Rufus Jones speaks about prayer as being not a petition. Does that sound familiar? We're not going to God and we're saying, oh, please change me because I'm broken, or please change, well, you know what we usually do, please change these other people. You know. Fix this, or bring me something, or won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? No, we go to God for the purpose of going to God. We go to God for communion. We go to God for the experience of being in the presence, in the holy presence, and that is its own reward. He says the seeking of God is its own reward. There's not necessarily a material payoff. Prayer for a material payoff isn't really prayer. It's sort of gaming the system in a way. Like if in the old school way of thinking, I'm in church today, so this buys me some time. You know, this buys me some latitude in my behavior in the coming week. No. This idea of prayer, he says the questing is the blessing. Isn't that beautiful? The questing is in other words, the process is its own deliverance, is its own benefit. What do I take away from it? I have an experience of the creator of everything, a personal experience, and I can return to that and build on that the way I build on any relationship I have with any human entity. Think of the people that you have in your life. You have a conversation with them, you establish an understanding with them, and when you go back to them the next time, you pick up where you left off. You don't have to explain yourself all over again. You tell them your hopes and dreams, you go see them after a while, they say, how are you doing with that? How's that coming along? And you brief them, you bring them up to date on things, you know? Well, you can have the same kind of relationship, Jones says, and we know, with the source of all beingness, where it's not like, now, who were you again? And what was that? And you have to prove yourself and bring out your credentials. You don't have to bring out your passport, or like in the old movies, you know, show me your papers. No, it knows you as you are. And it knows you as the experience that it's having. This is the way I love to put it. I don't think I made it up, but I really like it. It knows you, Spirit knows you as the experience that it's having of itself in this world at this time by means of you. And so you are an information reception, management, and delivery system on behalf of the infinite out there having an experience of life in a certain way that you may or may not be totally enjoying. And that's somewhat of a side issue, yet very addressable, because a benefit to having a direct experience of the source of all life is that your default value becomes joy. Your default value becomes joy even when it's raining, even when it's troubling, even when you're a little bit lost. So we wander around sometimes. Another favorite saying of mine comes from Lord of the Rings. It says, not all who wander are lost. Not all who wander are lost. We see ourselves wandering and we think, oh, I have no inner compass at all. But maybe I'm just dabbling. You know, life is a buffet. Maybe I'm just dabbling in certain ideas or potentials or possibilities for myself, which brings me to this. It's Labor Day weekend. Yeah, it's Labor Day tomorrow. What is the metaphysical interpretation of Labor Day? You can do this with anything. As a matter of fact, Wayne Dyer was he wrote a book called Happy Holidays back in the day, before anybody really knew who he was, and I don't think it sold real well, but he had a metaphorical interpretation of each of the holidays, and not just the religious holidays that have, you know, a heavy metaphorical baggage, but stuff like Labor Day. So what is the purpose of labor metaphysically? Our labor is our creative expression. It need not be drudgery. It need not be just working to pay bills until you eventually die. It should be and can be great creative expression. And you might multitask, and many do. You know, there are people who have a certain job or career that pays the bills, but in their free time, they're doing music. And so I knew a guy a long time, 50 years ago. I knew a guy who was a chemist with an oil company, and and that's a pretty big job. That's what he did. But 2 or 3 times a week, he had 3 or 4 friends come in the house, and they sat in a circle in the living room and played chamber music. Isn't that great? I don't remember if he played the cello or the violin or the viola, but it was his passion. And he was good. They were all good. They didn't do it professionally, and so the outside observer looks at that and says, well, if you were really that good, you'd have a recording contract. You know, you'd be in an orchestra. No, he liked chemistry too. He liked what he was doing. You look at these different tasks, and it takes you a while. Some of us, it's taken a while before we found our foothold, found our rhythm in what we wanted to do in the world. I was reading a story just yesterday about a fellow named J.B. Saucedo. Have you heard the name J.B. Saucedo? J.B. Saucedo is from LaPorte, Texas, which is a small town. I got some Texana for you today, especially those of you who are at a distance who wonder what Texas is really all about. And I get this from you, especially you Californians out there. You're like, do what? LaPorte, Texas is an industrial town, small town just south of the ship channel, and where this man grew up. He's a young man, and he said most of the people there, it seemed to be most people's families worked either for NASA or the petrochemical industry along the ship channel, or something to do with shipping, you know. And he said, but there's a very great creative spirit in LaPorte. There's art, and there's culture, and there's music. And he graduated from LaPorte High School, where he was in the theater program. And then he went off to UT Austin, and he studied business, and then he thought about pre-law, and then somebody introduced him to photography. And he got into that. And he started a photography company taking pictures of products, especially furniture. So this guy went all over the place photographing furniture for catalogs and websites and things like this. And that led to something else, and that led to something else. And then he had a podcast he was doing, And he's always been very interested in small town Texas and history and culture and music and food and all the different things like this. And so he got a call recently from some people with Texas Monthly Magazine saying that Bob and Kelly, I don't remember their last names, but you might, Bob and Kelly are retiring from hosting Texas Country Reporter television program. Would he be interested in being the host? And he starts that this month. Texas Country Reporter is the longest running independently produced program in television history in America. 54 years this show has been on. You might have seen it. You might not pay a lot of attention to it. They hit 3 spots every show, and it might be like a sculptor here and some people with a I don't know, doing kind of gardening or something here, and somebody who's opened a restaurant. But there's always a hook to the story. There's always a backstory that makes it especially fascinating. And he's now going to head that up. But it was a winding path that led to it. And you know what he did to get there? He might not tell you this right out. You had to read between the lines a little bit in the article to get this. He listened. He listened to a call that involved his passions and his talents, and also involved, as it always does, stretching. He's going to have to learn a lot of things he doesn't yet know in order to do this and do it well. So that's our work. And again, we listen inside, and prayer will direct us into something that makes our heart open. Prayer is not for the purpose of correcting something that's wrong. Why? Because the source of all life in which we pray doesn't see anything wrong. It cares for us without correction. It cares for us without, and you know what? We're not used to that. Usually when somebody cares for you, they wish you'd turn out a little bit differently than you have. Sit up a little straighter, make a little more money, have some more friends, have something, do something, be better. We interpret that as care. That's not care, that's coaching. Coaching's not a bad thing, but it's no substitute for care, which says, I care for you unconditionally, meaning however you turn out. And that's how Spirit loves us, is because it sees us. We say sometimes it sees us as perfect, and that's confusing. I realize that, because we're not, in one sense, perfect. We're not flawless, you know. We all make mistakes, but we're perfect in the sense that we're not a mistake, and we can never violate our divine nature, no matter how stupid we are, which is great. So it just embraces us the way that we are, and it says, go be you. You go be you. Go do you, as the kids are saying today. Go do you, right? And so, you know, that's how we can show up. So we listen to this source speaking through the silence, and it reminds us, says, you're my beloved child. You're my beloved child. Rufus Jones may not have been the person who coined the expression beloved community, but he was one of the earliest to use it, as Dr. King later did, and it's come into the vernacular now, the beloved community, the African-American community, the community at large that loves itself and loves one another and sees itself as a whole unit and wants to take care of itself, wants to do good things. One of the most impressive things about the Religious Society of Friends is how they take care of each other and the world. And if anybody wonders, well, why are we bringing them up in a conversation on metaphysical groups, consider this. How many other metaphysical groups you know have won the Nobel Peace Prize? For the Friends Service Committee, which this man helped found. And the work that they did ending enslavement in this country and in the Western Hemisphere, the work that they did after the Second World War, the work that they're continuing to do right now in the world today. And there's not but 375,000 members of this organization, as far as they keep records, you know. Doing beautiful things out there, and not one whit of it, not one iota of it is proselytization. Not one bit of it is arm twisting about if only you'd come to the truth, you know, and be baptized in our faith and everything. No. We'll take you as we find you and do what we can to help you. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing. I could be a Quaker. I could be a Quaker. Except they sit in the silence. And I'm not a silent type. I'd like to get up and say some stuff, and they tell me to sit down and be quiet, and well, it just, I don't think would work out. So this is a better gig for me, you know, but all praise to them. All praise to them for the work that they do. So the thing about care that I'd like to leave you with today about does God, this is a question I get a lot, and it comes up to all of us who teach this stuff. Does God care in the way that we have been taught to think God does? Well, no. Yes, God cares, but not in the way you think God does or have been taught. I don't believe. It just doesn't, it's not logical. It doesn't stand to reason if what we're talking about by way of God is an infinite system. An infinite system can do anything except not be an infinite system. Can't step outside of itself because there's nowhere to step. All there is this one, right? So if it loves and it cares and it dotes and it does all that, it's doing it in an intrinsic way, in an inward way, an inward-facing way. It's not looking out at you. It's looking into itself and finding you at the heart of itself and caring for you in that way and letting you be you and letting you be free. Letting you be free to make your own choices that have consequences. And the consequences are not teed up as punishment and reward. They're just consequences. And you and I get to interpret them. Whoa, here comes some consequences. And very often we want to dumb it down to, is this a punishment or is it a reward? It's both and neither most of the time, right? It's that, so, you remember that old story about, so, you know, something bad happened, so, it is what it is. Something good happened, something bad happened, something good happened. In other words, life is a texture, life is a pattern of things that occur. As you look back at your life's journey, you see losses and you see pitfalls and so on, and then you realize, well, they made me stronger, they led me in a new direction, caused me to overcome some things, opened my heart and compassion. How can I call these things failures? They're not. They're just a series of stuff, you know. But they're all consequences. They're all consequences to an established pattern of thought within the self, thought and feeling equaling belief. So Spirit cares for us, again, without correction, without a need for redemption, without a need to pull us out of the misery of our human estate and elevating us to some divine, lofty height. It just loves us as we are. We say, okay, great. How does it deliver the goods? That's where it gets interesting. It delivers the goods through us, through people. See, every time in my life I have prayed for something to happen, it's come through other people. Sometimes it comes through animals, but I've had more people in my life than I've had animals, and so it's been, you know, people. And sometimes it comes out of thin air, but usually it's conducted by people. If I ask myself, well, you know, what is it I want to do next? The phone rings or an email comes in or something occurs that involves group activity, involves communication with someone else. There's a restaurant in New York City called God's Love We Deliver. Started out as a catering service. I'll tell you about this in detail some other time, as I have before, but I don't have all the notes in front of me right now who did what. I can't remember the woman's name who created this. But back during the HIV/AIDS crisis, as it first unfolded in the mid-1980s, when chiefly young gay men were experiencing an onset of god-awful symptoms from this dread disease. People, well, were afraid. They were afraid for their own health, and they avoided them. And the few that didn't would bring things. There was this one story I heard of a man. They brought him a bunch of cake mix and stuff, and kind of left it at his door. Here, you do something with this. Guy said, I'm too sick to stand and bake something out of a box. You know, if you want to do something good for me, bring me a Bring me a cake that's already baked. Bring me something I can eat. Bring me something I can keep down. And this woman heard this, and she created God's Love We Deliver, where medically appropriate meals were created, tailored to the needs of suffering HIV/AIDS patients, now expanded to cancer patients, Alzheimer's patients, anyone with a need across the 5 boroughs of New York. They will deliver this food, fully prepared, absolutely free. It's a beautiful thing. Now, people with money have heard about this, and they've funded it, and she's been on talk shows, and it's become this big thing, and it's picked up in other cities and so on, too. Well, not only is it a very worthwhile and beautiful thing, but it's a perfect illustration of how the divine works in life. Works through our hands, works through what we manage to cobble together. So, in the week to come, what I want to encourage everybody to do, and I'll join you in doing it, is refocus prayer life. So often in New Thought, it's on personal enrichment, us getting each of us what we need and want, But the beloved community, the communal spirit of all of this, is something to refocus on. How can I be of maximum benefit to my world and the other godlings in it? How can I follow my inner light to be a creative expression in the world, do something magical there? How can I find some humor in all of this? So it's not so heavy. And I'm big on that. I'm big on humor. It's like, so I'm going to close with this little story I think is just absolutely great. And this goes to the Texana again, too, which the people out of town may or may not understand. There's a huge rivalry goes on in this state. So the city of Dallas wanted to hire a new city manager, so they brought in an ad agency to create a real spiffy brochure advertising their city and all of its benefits and so on. And they had this beautiful skyline photo on the front of it, and they sent it out to everybody until somebody realized the skyline was Houston. Now, it's not a good metaphysical practice to laugh at other people's mistakes, but come on. Come on. That's just too good. That's just too good to let go. So look at the irony of life, the magical irony of life, and if you ever can't spot it, pull this out of your pocket. You are a spiritual being having a human experience, and there's nothing funnier than that. Nothing funnier than that. So let's know together now. One life, one power, one presence, one light. Now say to the room, to the air, speak to the power, say fiat lux. Fiat lux. Let there be light. And there is light. And in that light there's guidance, direction, purpose, meaning. In their light there's wandering and finding and misplacing and finding again in that light. Life is a journey with no fixed and final destination. It is an experience. And in this experiential realm, we live in the moment, live in the now, sensing it all, feeling it all, letting it all in. We're guided to do that which ought to be done by us, and we're guided to rest and take care of ourselves as well as others. There's a balance that's achieved. On this holiday weekend, with a day off for many tomorrow, it's a time to regroup and be still and look within and look around and inevitably look forward, but carrying the centered self of present time into each subsequent moment. This is easy to do. It's our nature to do it. It's easy for us to love because we are love. And for this knowing and its manifestation in form, everywhere we turn, I am so deeply grateful. I release this word now into the infinite, calling it done, and so it is.
Almost every day of the week we got something going on. We have a meeting on Monday evening, Wednesday evening. Those are book studies. Thursday evening we have sacred activism. Friday we have philosophy Fridays. There's always something going on. So please check those out. Coming up on the 20th of this month we have a drum circle. And then on the 18th of this month we have our soul session. Soul session is put on by our Be the Change group, and the focus of the Be the Change group is to bring people's awareness to a lot of things that are not the way they ought to be in our society. For instance, race relations is one. But we also have other issues, such as how men have behaved throughout the ages. Eamon Duffy has been involved in men's groups for a long time. I've not been a big fan of men's groups because of the way they operate. This is completely different. And our soul session will be him being interviewed by Reverend Jesse, and he will explain to you how masculinity ought to be working in our world. And they're putting on a big session actually later, of which Reverend Jesse is going to be a participant. So that's kind of cool. The rest of it you can read in here. If you don't know, you can ask me further. Part of our job is to actually help make the world a better place. In order to do that, it takes money to upkeep our center here. You know, it's not cheap, and we appreciate all that you do for giving to us, and we just ask you to continue being generous in whatever way you can. And we're not like a regular church where we say, hey, you've got to tithe this, you've got to tithe that. No, you look in your own heart and you decide what it is you think you need to give to help support it. And I assure you that this is all going to help him make the world a better place. So if you want to say with me now, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all the good I am and have, all the good I give and receive. I am prosperous now, and so it is.
My last responsibility is my favorite responsibility. I get to turn you loose with some prayer. And it's going to be that kind of prayer because I'm still thinking about whatever's done for us is done through us. And the really cool thing about that is that means we get to be the answers to each other's prayers. So I am inviting you to be open to the opportunities to see yourself as the answer to someone's prayer. To see that and to see your prayers answered through other people. It's an amazing feeling that kind of goes into that gratitude work that we love to do. So know with me now, consciously step into that. Because it's all sacred all the time, but consciously step into that sacred with me and know that there is one power, one presence, one life, one love. And that each and every one of us live that life. We are the physical manifestation of that presence. And we are the divine channels for that love and that power. And when we step into the knowingness of who we are, the beloved expressions of the divine, amazing things happen. So I'm knowing as we surf through this week, as the temperatures are falling, and it is cooling off relative to our area, that we look in each other's eyes and see the divine looking back. That we look in the mirror and see the divine looking back. That we feel the arms of the divine in each hug that we give and receive. That we are the divine that always, always, always says yes. And that we recognize the divine yes, that divine opportunity, every time it is presented to us, to either give or receive. And I am knowing this with all of the gratitude in my being. I am grateful for a teaching that teaches me who I am. I am grateful for a teaching that teaches me who you are. I am grateful for this community that comes together to remind each other. I am grateful for our practitioners, our ministers, our musicians. I am grateful for each and every one of you. I am grateful for the technology that allows us to have members all over the country, maybe even around the world. And I am grateful just because it's another word for love. And love is where it's at. So I release my word into law with love, knowing that it is done. And so it is.
Say with me now, something wonderful is happening through me.
Something wonderful is happening through me.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in everything I am.
I feel it in everything I am.
I choose it.
I choose it.
I trust it.
I trust it.
I use it.
I use
And
it.
I love it. And so it is.
So it is.